Okay, Eric, what is our Star Trek trivia?
Star Trek trivia. Okay. It's an early one. So, this goes way back. Who served as Chief Medical Officer during Captain Pike's command of the USS Enterprise? There's 4 options, as always. A. Dr. Elizabeth Denner. B. Dr. Mark Piper. C. Dr. Mbenga. Or D. Dr. Philip Boyce. Oh, look at all this stuff.
Pew pew laser.
Only a loser would complain about it. Yeah.
Welcome to A Piece of the Action. I'm Micah.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Greg.
And we're returning to our ongoing series where we're looking at some of the board games that have been voted on the most, according to BoardGameGeek.com. And this week, we are considering yet another very popular game. I'm still certainly one that most fans will be pretty familiar with in the top 10, and that is the game Agricola. So Eric and Greg sat down, and I think you guys got to play it several times. And I know Greg has played this before for sure, but they were able to look at a little more in depth this last week and put some thoughts together for us. So let's see, it came out in 2007, and you just told me the pronunciation, but I forget. Uwe Rosenberg, is that right?
Yep. Sounds about right.
Right. So Uwe Rosenberg is the designer. Let's go ahead and start out with, and maybe we'll switch it up a little bit and go to Greg, ask to describe the premise of Agricola.
So the premise is that you are a couple in Central Europe. I think in the 1600s time period. You're coming out of the plague, right? And so you're trying to rebuild your farmstead, I guess. So you start out very, very basic. It's just you and your wife and two rooms, and that's it. And you got like just wide open spaces. So over the course of the game, you're trying to build up your family, trying to have kids, make your house bigger, build up fields, build up pastures, have animals, have vegetables, have grain, and all of that's accomplished through a fairly simple worker placement aspect, where you just put a worker and it says, this plows the field. Go here, you get yourself wood. You go here, you can use wood and stone to build this thing. You also have a hand of cards that give you occupations and minor improvements you can use throughout the game. There's also a board with major improvements on the game. But all that put together is you, by taking these spots on the board one by one, allows you to take these actions. So eventually you have a fleshed out, well-balanced farm at the end of the game. And whoever has the best farm, the game scores the farm based upon different details on a card. So if you have this many cows, you get this many points. You have this many pigs, you get this many points. So whoever has the best farm according to that card wins the game. So
okay.
That's it.
All right. Eric, anything you'd like to add as far as the premise of Agricola goes? I mean, it sounds agricultural, which I kind of wondered if there was a connection between, it seems like an obvious derivation of the word, but anything else you'd like to add to that, Eric?
Yeah, I think it's Latin for farmer, Agricola, right?
Oh, okay.
Or
well,
farm.
there you
I
go.
think so. Something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on here. I think it's funny that we went last week. We reviewed, I think, one of the lightest weight games with Ticket to Ride, and here we go. We jumped into this one is, last time I checked, weight 3.64 something on Board Game
More
Geek.
than double.
Huge jump.
Medium heavy, I'd say.
Yes, medium heavy, but a huge jump from Ticket to Ride.
Is.
And there is quite a bit of stuff going on. There's a lot of plates you need to keep spinning. And like Greg said, it's a worker placement game. It's a straight up worker placement game. It doesn't have any frills on it. So if you go to a certain location, your opponents cannot go there. There is no way around it.
Yeah, this is before they wussify the worker placement genre. by allowing people to kick people out and pay money and stuff like that. It just blocks down that spot. You cannot go.
And we talked about it a little bit before, but worker placement is basically a game mechanic by which you determine what you're able to do that turn. So there's usually a lot of options, a lot of different things that you can do, and by placing a worker on a specific place on a board, you are choosing to do something like buy pigs or plow a field. So you can't do all those things at once, so you have to choose. And your workers are limited, like Greg said. You have at the beginning, you only have 2 workers because it's just a man and a wife. And hopefully, you get more as the game progresses. It's also a resource management game, in that you are collecting resources, and it's a farming game. So you're collecting resources like grain and pigs and cows and sheep and vegetables, and you need to use those things to either plant more fields or make more sheep, or use them to feed your family. You can eventually decide to cook those things and have enough food to eat. I found that if anybody's ever played any of those games, they're called time management games. I don't know if that sounds familiar. It's a video game style. Or like an app game, where you are running around you're managing your time, trying to get as much done in a specific amount of time.
Is this like one of those like you're running the restaurant and customers are coming in, and like the burger, you're running the burger joint and people are putting in orders and
Yes, I think they usually have names like Mania at the end, like
right, Burger Mania or
Cake Mania,
Restaurant Mania, something like that. Yeah.
This game actually made me feel a little like I was playing a time management game. So that's all I would add to the way it feels. If we're talking about the theme, did you want to talk about that now, or?
Yeah, well, that would be my next question, because one of the first things I think one of the obvious things you notice about the theme is how particularly non-grandiose it is, right? It seems pretty what's the word? Not boring, but like it's not menial, but it's made up of day-to-day things. What am I trying to say?
Well, it's a Euro game. I mean, a lot of the Euro games, especially from the 90s and the early 2000s, they're not exciting to the premises. They're not like going out and you're a Thor conquering.
It's the premise is not super dramatic, right?
Yeah. That's kind of a hallmark of Euro games, is they tend to be like building the castle or mucking out the stables, the game, things like that.
Okay, why don't you speak to that then, as you were about to, as far as how the theme played out, how you felt playing it?
Well, I mean, Greg talked about what the theme was. It's a farming game.
Sure.
And it's about a specific family farming. So you are playing a family. And so in that sense, I think it's pretty strong on theme. In fact, I think it's really strong on theme. I think it's almost a sim. It's almost, I would call it a farming sim. And another thing that adds to the theme of the game is the occupation cards. So you get these you get a big hand at the start, 14 cards. Half of them are occupations, half of them are little things like plows, little like tools, basically, that you can create. The occupations, the 7 occupation cards, they add a lot to the theme of the game. They let you kind of tailor the story a little bit in your head if you're so inclined. Maybe you're a tutor and you start tutoring people. You can play a tutor card, and now you have been trained as a tutor, and you can go and take tutor-like actions and what have you. It was funny in a game that we played, one of them, I was a brewer, so I became a master brewer. And it was hilarious because, like, I had grain. What that allowed you to do is take grain and turn it into beer. But turn it into food. Oh, that's what the card said. You take grain and you can convert it into food. And so I was having children, having babies. That's the story, is you have babies. That's how you get new workers. And the only food I had was food that had been generated from this master brewer card. And so in my head, I'm like, I'm filling the baby bottles with beer, And so in that sense, like it I like little moments like that in games where there's a little bit of story and a little bit of fun that can be had, and I think that the game is real heavy on theme.
Yeah, like the you ever hear that story about the heir to the Coors brewery?
No.
The whoever it is, this was on a podcast I listened to, when a new heir to that family is born, because it's not a publicly traded company, it's still family owned. Whenever a new heir is born, they go in and they put like 2 drops of Coors beer on his tongue as the very first thing that the baby has. Like, that's their family tradition. Before the child nurses or anything. So
that's weird and cult-like, and
yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay, all right. So I mean, did you? I guess, do you think that you felt? Well, let me ask you this. First of all, you think you felt strongly, like, sort of got a sense of what it would be like to be a struggling serf in the 1600s? Did it emulate that feel for you?
To me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
it did.
And would you say that this is then the contender for the most themed game that we've played so far?
I think this is definitely the most themed game we've played so far.
Okay. All right, Greg, what about you? What do you think?
I agree 100% with that. Not only does it feel like farming, but it feels like farming in that specific time period. Because it starts out as a struggle. Like in the beginning, just getting food is tough. And as you go, eventually by the end of the game, you have like this full functioning farm. So I agree. I think this is the most thematic. I mean, it might not be like that pew pew laser theme, but
right.
Some people may not like the theme, but for the theme that it's offering, I think it does it pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's it's fine, right? It's interesting how even how they can make it interesting. It just depends on the execution, right? It doesn't. You can certainly take a theme that seems exciting on the surface and turn it into a boring game, and so likewise the same thing. So, all right, well, let's go ahead then and let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the game, the system, and the mechanics. As you're playing the game, Greg, you gave us a rough outline sort of how it works. What are the things that you found and in the games you played with Eric, and just more generally, that you have to think about, or the pieces of the system that you have to keep in mind as you're playing Agricola?
So if I could first talk about how it feels, I've always kind of described Agricola as, it feels to me like in the beginning, you're at the bottom of a hill with this big boulder in front of you, and you have to roll this boulder up the hill, right? And then as you finally get towards the top of the hill, it starts to get easier and easier and easier. And just as you're about to crest that hill, the game ends. That's how Agricola feels. It's very tough in the beginning, because in the beginning of the game, you just gotta get food. The penalty for not feeding your family in this game is pretty severe, to the point where I don't think I've ever seen anyone fail to feed their family, because the penalty is so severe that people go out of their way to take horrible actions to avoid the penalty. So there's that in the beginning, and then you never think you have enough time in this game to get actual points out of it. You don't get points for making food, but you do by the end of it. As far as like strategic considerations, as with most worker placement games, I always say go for the extra workers first. That should be your first priority. And in fact, I think everyone that comes into a game of Agricola knows that. And you will find often that the best player gets the first worker, and that person will often win, if that makes sense. So extra workers in this game are important. That's the first consideration. But in the meantime, you also got to get a food engine going, because you have to have enough components put together, either through food through meat, which is through your animals, or food through plowing your fields, growing grain, and baking bread. Those are your 2 main sources of food. The animal strategy is easier to get going, I think. You can go that way. But I believe the grain strategy has more ceiling. There's more pieces to put together, but if you can get it going early, you're set for food forever. You don't have to worry about anything. So those are the two things in the beginning: working towards your extra family member, which also requires you to get extra food because every new family member requires new food. So those two are almost at odds with each other. And I always get a feeling when I play this game that you're almost redlining, like you're putting your pedal to the metal where you don't know where that food's going to come from. It always feels like, okay,
what do you mean?
can
you elaborate on that a little bit?
Because what I mean by is like you basically know, okay, I'm going to go full on. I need to get an extra family member, but man, how am I going to get the food for this thing? Right? Mm-hmm. You just have to kind of like jump over the cliff and hope that you'll figure it out by the time it gets there. That's how the game feels to me. You always find a way, like there's always a way, but that's just that feeling that the actions in this game are so tight that you have only so many in the game. It's such an efficiency game that one mistake feels like it could just throw everything off. Mm-hmm. So there's always that constant, am I wasting time doing this? Am I wasting time doing this? But those are the main considerations. And then on top of that, I think the main consideration, strategically, in my opinion, is your cards you get. So you get, Eric talked about it, 7 occupation cards, 7 minor improvement cards. Those are randomly drawn at the beginning of the game from a huge deck of cards. I think the best players are the ones that can look at those cards and work out their best combinations and best combos, and from those cards work out what their strategy is going to be in this game. So learning how to read the cards well and seeing where this one dovetails well with this card, I'm going to get this card down in this one. I think that's a strong player is able to figure out which cards in their hand work the best together. So I think all in all, that's kind of how the game feels and things you should be considering.
Okay. Let's see. It seems like so it's interesting you talk about getting extra workers. It kind of because workers just like we said, it's worker placement is essentially just action selection. I think you've said that before, right? And so having extra workers is just the equivalent of gaining extra actions. And, it makes sense to think at the end of the game, if one player has had 20% or 30% more actions than anybody else, obviously it's sort of like in the NFL when they don't look at score, but they look at time of possession as a metric to how well the team is doing, right? During the game, that it's going to be hard to see how getting all those extra actions are going to do anything but sort of give you a straight victory.
Way to include a non-nerd reference into our dirty podcast.
Yeah, between that and Coors.
Way to go.
Yeah. All right. Well, what about you, Eric? What were you thinking? Because your perspectives, I think, are a little different, right? Because Greg has had more experience with Agricola than you did going into it. So, what were your thoughts as far as the mechanics and the strategy and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, take it all with a grain of salt. I had to cram on this game. I had never played it before, but I think I agree with Greg that there's. I came up with 4 F's that you need to pay attention to, and it's food, family, farm, and flexibility. So, and I think it's in that order. So you need to make sure you've got your food taken care of each turn, because as Greg says, if you can't feed your family, then you have to beg, and a begging card is -3 points. That's huge. So you don't want to take that. It's a cool mechanic, though, by the way. I think that's kind of a neat mechanic that you don't like, your worker doesn't go away. It's just that you have to take a -3 points. You still get the food effectively, but you have to beg for it, and that's a bad thing. That's kind of cool. So get your food taken care of, and then build your family as quickly as possible. And as Greg said, that is a balance, because your more family means more food that you need, and so those things are going to be neck and neck as you go. But those are your first 2 priorities. Then you need to get your farm, figure out something to do with your farm. Once you've got basic sustenance taken care of, where are you going to get your points? Your points, I look at the points board and figure out, like, okay, what can I get? And how can I capitalize on that? And then be flexible. One of the mistakes I made was I relied on my beer too much, my master brewer, and I never transitioned away from any sustainable way to actually make
your in-game beer, not your
my end game
drinking.
beer was weak.
Okay.
I never figured out a way to make that sustainable, really. And so, like, being flexible, if you've got a plan in the early game, that might not sustain you all the way through to the end game because your family's going to grow and you're going to need different things as you go. And then one more thing to keep in mind is that, and this is just a general principle, I think, while it's very easy to get enamored of the card combos because you've got 14 cards in your hand and you're like, oh, look at all this stuff that if I can just play a bunch of minor improvements and get a ton of occupations, I can get all this card synergy and I can win that way. And I think that is definitely part of the game, but I think it's a smaller part than just good resource management. You need to be able to work the board fundamentally well and manage your resources and not rely on some cool card combo that you've got in your hand. I think it's like a 70-30 kind of split, where 30% of you winning might rely on cards, but the rest of it's going to be on just, having good control over an understanding of the way the board works.
Okay, and how efficient you are with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bring up one more thing.
Yes.
As Eric was talking, I was thinking about another thing to think about is, so in the whole front half of the game, you're thinking about your food pretty much, your family, getting all that worked out, and eventually you do kind of transition into point mode. Like, okay, that's all set up. Points, what should I do for points? I do think it's worth noting in this game, it rewards a balanced farm. So there's caps, actually. I can't just keep collecting cows forever because eventually that caps out at 4 points, no matter how many cows I get. But you get negatives for not having items, which is -1. So I have no cows, I get -1. I have 1 cow, I get 1 point. That's a 2-point swing right there. So you need to make sure you I think having a balanced farm makes sure you get at least a vegetable, get a grain out there, get a pig, get a sheep, get all the things you need to avoid that -1 point is a pretty big deal too. So instead of just focusing on, I'm going to be the sheep king, you need to have you need to make sure you have a balanced farm. Some of Uwe's later games reward focusing on one thing, but Agricola definitely rewards balance. So
yeah, so that's kind of interesting because that would seem to be very directly counter to some of the other games where we've said the thing you need to do is find the one thing you can do that won't conflict with what other people are doing and sort of focus on it.
That is true in this game, though, and in a way, not with points, but with food, because there's only so many animals on the board. So if I'm deciding to build a food engine via meat, and everyone else is, well, they're all taking the meat off the board, all the animals off the board. I can't do it. Then I may have to go into a grain strategy, right? So part of that is watching what are the people getting, who's getting the ovens, because you can't cook those animals or cook the bread unless you take cards, which are also, there's only one, there's 8.
There's 4.
10. There's 10 major improvement cards.
Yeah, but there's only 4 ways to...
4 of them will actually cook for you.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure... No, I'm sorry, there's more than 4 because there's 2 fireplaces. There's 6. 2 are improvements of the 2 below it. But anyways, there's 6. So there's 6 ways to cook food. So if you see everyone grabbing okay, everyone's going bread. There's only 2 of those in the whole board there. Well, then I better go meat. So there is some of that. Which lane can I get in here as far as food goes? Because I would say the points are almost it's not an afterthought, but so much of this game is focused on just surviving that it's almost like, okay, how can I eke out points here eventually? I just need to figure out a food engine here. I need to get my family going first. So that's a big part of the strategy.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of. I guess it's interesting because you both have sort of discussed how it seems like the game kind of comes at you in phases, or that is to say, you progress through it in sort of some rough phases. How much information in the game is out there for you to begin planning? How much mental energy can you expend on planning for how you're going to get points when you're early on in the stage? Is it like a complete mind shift, or can you have sort of a fully laid out strategy? Do you have enough information at the beginning to have a rough idea where you want to go even long term from an early point?
So I would say the cards you start with give you a good idea of how you want to go. There is no hidden information in this game aside from what's in the player's hands, and they do somewhat randomize basically every new round a new action spot becomes available, and the game is divided up in so many like.
And by action spot, you mean another place that
another place you can go. So, for example, maybe in round 1, 2, or 3, maybe the sheep will come out, and now you can go get sheep, right? Now there's like different. I forget how they round it. There's like rounds and there's like phases, maybe. I don't know what they call them. So like in phase 1,
rounds and turns.
Rounds and turns, or maybe yes, maybe in round 1 there's 4 phases. Those cards are shuffled up, so you don't know exactly what order they'll come out in.
But they're always the same.
But they're always the same. So you know that somewhere in the next 2 or 3 turns this card's coming. And those get shorter as the game goes. So by the end, there's like only 2, so it can be 50-50 which one's coming out next round. And the last round is always 1 card. So as the game goes, that information becomes more known. But I mean, that's really minor, that I feel. So it's pretty open information. The only big thing is you don't know what other people are going to do. Because that's a big thing in this game. Because they take that spot, it's gone. So...
So, like Eric said, you got to have some flexibility.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Eric, anything you want to add to what Greg said there before we move on to the next part?
No, although I remembered one part that is going to come up later in at least my discussion of the game, and that's so I wanted to talk about it as far as the rules are concerned. Greg reminded me. So you've got these phases and turns, and at the end of every round, a harvest happens, and so you have to feed your family at the harvest. So there's a timer on the game. The game will only ever last 14 turns, and the number of turns you get before a harvest gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So it's like going into winter. So you're going to get 4 turns, and then a harvest is going to happen, and you have to feed your family. Then you're going to get 3 turns, and 3 turns, and then 2 turns. And so there's an interesting pressure that is on you that shows up just from the side of the board, not from the players. But as far as what you were talking about with regards to strategy and thinking of, actually, I don't remember exactly what your comment was, but I don't remember what your comment was, but I remember what I wanted to say about it.
Okay. That seems. That's fine.
It was that you have to, the only pressure, like one of the things that will change the way you determine read out your future turns is the other players. That's the only thing. So the other players might take all the wood on the board, and you were planning on, like, your next turn you were planning on getting that wood and then building a house with it or another room with it. You can't rely on that. But the only reason you can't rely on that is because other players get actions too.
Yeah, that's always lame.
It's always a problem.
Always
life.
a problem.
People
okay,
doing
very
stuff.
good. Okay, good. So let's go ahead now and let's talk about the good and the bad of Agricola. Let's start out with the good. What did Agricola do well? Eric.
Well, I know last video, Greg prepped everybody by saying that we're going to have a major disagreement on this game, but actually I love this game. I think it's awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed this game, and currently it's my favorite game that we've played so far. It is the first one that feels like it's the first one that feels like a game. You know, this isn't. Catan is fun. I want to play Catan with family members and people that I enjoy their company with. I don't want to play Catan because of Catan anymore. You know,
Agricola. I want to play Catan for you.
I want to play more Agricola because of Agricola, and regardless of the people that I'm playing it with. There's a lot of good things with regards to this game, and I just picked a couple of them to really highlight. The first one is like good. It has kind of almost a sandbox feel to me, and now sandbox is a particular type of game, and I know it's not a sandbox game, but there are sandbox style choices with this game. There's a satisfying number of different ways to play this game. Do you want to go the whole farming route? Do you want to go animal husbandry? Do you want to focus on construction and try to get the max house size and make it all stone and, get your good materials and have fences out the wazoo and, stables everywhere. Or you could go occupation route and try to get some interesting bonuses. And card combos, I don't think card combos are the way to win necessarily, but they're definitely they're there, and they're a part of. You're going to typically need variety in your farm to be successful, but your particular style of play can legitimately lean one way or the other, and can take one of those options and run with it, kind of, and you'll still have a good looking farm at the end of the game. I think one cool thing, one good aspect of a good sandbox game, in my opinion, is when it allows the player to make real, meaningful choices based on their preferences, based on what they want to do, and then which produce logical results. And Agricola isn't a sandbox game necessarily, but it does have that feature. It allows you to make personal choices in the game that then have actual in-game logical outcomes. And I think that's fantastic. There's also some pragmatic things that I like about the game. The length is good.
How long is it?
It's about an hour. About an hour. It's definitely going to go up depending on how many players you have.
It depends.
But I would say I'd probably say about 30 minutes per player.
Yeah, 30 to 45 minutes per player, I would say. It's 2 to 5 players, so that can go from an hour to.
It could go long.
Yeah, quite a long time.
But the other cool thing about this game is that it has kind of a handicap, well, not a handicap system. It has a difficulty rating. So do you want to play the harder version of the game, or the more complex version of the game? There are different decks that you can choose to say, well, I want to play I've played this 50 times. I want to play the K deck, and that introduces a different stack of occupations and things that you can get in your hand, and now things are more interesting. I love that. That's great. Another thing is the balance of this game. There's a really fantastic balance between the struggle against the board and the timing of when that harvest is coming. There's a balance between that kind of struggle and the struggle between the other players who need the same resources as you, and it doesn't feel arbitrarily mean or ill-tempered. Like with Ticket to Ride, the game itself had zero challenge. Like if you were playing Ticket to Ride solo, you're just putting down track and fulfilling all the things, and there's no challenge to the actual board itself. All the challenge, 100% of the challenge in Ticket to Ride, comes from the other players messing you up. And that can lead to some table flipping moments for me. But in Agricola, the board is hard enough because that harvest is coming. Harvest is coming, and you need to do something productive, and you need to feed your family. And so, and that there are other families who need that same thing. So when Greg takes all the clay off the board and I was just about to grab it, I can forgive him because I know how hard the board itself is. It's hard being a farmer.
Would you say that, so are you saying that like it's so hard that there's no room for you to waste a move doing just a take that style?
That's right. That is part of somebody else. That is definitely part of it, where that didn't exist in Ticket to Ride, I don't think. But the other part of it is like, hey, I know he needs that clay. You can't waste a turn, just like you said, you can't waste a turn just doing, well, I'm just going to take that clay from you. You probably can't do that. I don't want to make a blanket statement, but typically the game is hard it's hard to feed your family. And so you're planning stuff out, and when you say, okay, then the other thing about the game is that mechanically resources accumulate. So if somebody hasn't taken the wood spot, now that wood stays there, and now it gets 3 more woods. So now it's more valuable. And so spots that haven't been taken in a long time some spots become more and more valuable. And so, everybody starts looking at that wood, and they're thinking, oh, 6 wood, 9 wood. Okay, I need to get that. And then somebody else gets it. Okay, but it doesn't feel like a stab in the back. Anyway, I love this game. I think it's great.
Okay.
Good balance.
Yeah. Seems like it's. Is that? Do you guys think that was the design goal? Is that clear? That was the point of the game.
I don't know. Uwe is really smart.
Yeah,
he's a really smart guy.
Of course, this game came out after he got abducted by aliens, and because everything he made before this game was like these really simple but interesting card games, and suddenly he just drops this brick out of the sky. And it's like, who is this guy? But yeah, but no, I'm sure it's all by design. It's not. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Greg, what would you say then? What do you think Agricola does well?
Yeah, so I'm really happy to hear Eric say he likes it. That means after quarantine we can play this more often.
Continue to be friends.
I'm a little biased in this game, I'm going to admit, because for me, this was my gateway game, I consider. I mean, I've played games my whole life, of course. I mean, I played the Decipher CCG Star Wars game when I got my first job at 16. My mom collected board games like crazy, but they're all like the big box store stuff. I played Samurai Swords a lot through my life. We played a lot of pen and paper RPGs. And I think we even played Twilight Imperium 3 before I played this game. But this was the game that turned board games from being one of my geeky hobbies into my primary geeky hobby.
Okay.
That makes sense. This is the game that basically made me go, hey, this is it. I'm a board gamer now. This because it opened my eyes to this world of heavy Euro games that I didn't know existed, where I was like, wow, there's this whole world of games where it's just these really complex puzzles that I can just sit down and think in an abstract way, pulling levers and seeing what happens here. And, so Agricola introduced me to that. So it has a special place in my heart. I vividly remember going down to the board game store. Gary's Games used to be over there in Greenwood. Doesn't exist anymore. And going in, like the noob I was, and asking the guy, do you have Agricola here?
Agricola.
Yeah.
Hey, it's my job to mispronounce the names of the games.
And paying full retail price for it. Man, what a noob. Anyways.
Right.
And reading the instructions on the way to my friend's house, figuring out how to play it in the car. Anyways, so yeah, I mean, this was my gateway game for that. What I like about it is, I mean, Eric pretty much summed up a lot of what I like about it. It's meaty game. There's a lot to think about, but the rules are not complicated. The rules are very simple. Put a worker here, do the action. So the meat comes from the actual play itself. The cards are a big deal of the game. I'm gonna disagree with Eric slightly on that. I do think cards are a huge part of learning how to win the game. If you look at like scores between people because you can play this game as a family version, where you don't play the cards at all. You just leave the cards out of the game. You just play at the spots on the board. And the high scores when people play this between that version and with the cards is quite different, because you can get a lot of points if you can get good synergies going. But anyways, the nice thing about those cards are, as Eric alluded to, the game itself the base game comes with 3 decks. The easy deck, interactive deck, and the complex deck. It should be noted too, we're reviewing the old Agricola. There's a revised edition out that's almost the same with some card tweaks. I believe in there it's called the A, B, and C deck. Anyways, it comes with 3 decks out of the box. And then there's plenty of decks you can go buy if you want them. If you're like, man, I've seen every card, and there's hundreds of cards, I doubt you'll see them all. But if you did, there's plenty of other decks you can buy, and that changes the game significantly. So there's plenty of room to grow. I've since mixed all 3 decks together. That's how I play now. But so there's that. And I always talk about tension.
Right.
This game has plenty of tension. So there's always that. Every move matters so much that you have to watch the other players and go, okay, what are they going to do next turn? What does it look like they're going for? I need to prioritize that. I talk about that a lot, prioritization. But in this game, it's a big deal because, yeah, it's all about efficiency of moves. So, I mean, all that combined just makes a really good, deep, thinky game that's not too long. It breezes along pretty quickly. It's just a fun game. I mean, I like this game quite a bit.
Okay, so so with that in mind, so you touched on players there. So I have a couple of follow-up questions I can think of. First of all, you always talk about player interaction, but on one hand, it sounds like there can't be too much explicit player interaction just for its own sake, because it sounds like the demands of the board are such that you can't really spend a lot of time getting into needless player conflicts. But on the other hand, you just said that you do have to very carefully watch what the other players are doing. So how do you feel about player conflict or player interaction, I should say, in Agricola?
So I was going to bring this up in the negative section.
Okay, well, hold on.
But no, it's fine. It's fine. It's not really a negative, actually. It's kind of a neutral, so it could fit anywhere.
Okay.
But basically, in this game, it generally fits the pattern of a game I usually don't like. In that, here's the actions that you guys are doing in this center board, and we all have our personal boards where we're building up our farms, right? A lot of what you're doing is on your personal board.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, in games, I don't like that because
that generally leads to like sort of solitaire.
Yeah, right? You're just kind of like messing with your own personal board. But in this game, it's fine. Actually, it's okay in this game because it's the central board fight for spots is so harsh that that's enough player interaction. The game itself is so harsh that even slight player nudges taking your spot can really throw you off. In some ways, I think of like the predecessor to this game that's even more that way is like Antiquity, which has very little player interaction, but the game is so harsh that one slight nudge will throw you off. Agricola is kind of like that, a little softened though, but so for me it's fine, and it probably wouldn't fit in the wheelhouse of my perfect game nowadays, but I feel like it's good enough. You know, I'm fine with the player interaction in this game. It's not amazingly interactive, but what's there is meaty enough and challenging enough and tense enough that I'm okay with it.
Okay. All right. Well, that you'd actually touched on in the second thing I was going to ask you about just briefly. So since this was like your initial foray into modern board games, is there any opinion or concept that you had about Agricola that when you first were playing it that you feel you've sort of matured on or changed in the subsequent years of playing, you know, however many hundreds of other games you've played? Is there anything different for you now that you've come to realize over the years?
Not about Agricola per se. Agricola was like my first introduction to heavy Euro.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, oh, okay, I'm a heavy Euro fan. But then as time goes on, I start narrowing what that means down. Like, oh, not all Euros are my favorite. I like economic Euros. And I like Euros with a lot of conflict. You know what I mean? So I can narrow that down as I go. So I realized that, like, if I saw Agricola today, not having played it, I would probably go, this might not be my kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? With what I know my perfect taste are now.
Interesting.
But I think even if I did play it today, I would still have a similar opinion. It's ruthless enough, it's tense enough that I still really enjoy it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Very nice. All right. Well, let's follow up then with the bad. What did Agricola do poorly? Let's go back to Eric. What do you think?
So let me talk about a couple of things that I have heard people say that it does poorly and comment on them. So this is common stuff. Greg mentioned one of them, that it ends too soon. That's a common complaint about the game. I see it. I see the reason to complain about that, but I think only a loser would complain about it.
Okay.
No, I agree. That's a complaint.
Only somebody who's losing the game is going to say it ended too soon, and of course it did, because you're losing.
I haven't won yet.
Right. So go ahead.
But I think that gives the game like you want to go again, right? Because
leaves you wanting more.
Yeah, it definitely does. Like when you lose the game, you're like, man, if I only had one more turn.
Mm-hmm.
You know. But I don't think you feel that if you've actually been smart / a little lucky with regards to getting what you wanted to on the main table, in the main board. So I don't think it really suffers from that negative.
By the way, who for your games who won?
Greg won.
Greg won both of them.
Greg won. Yeah, but he's played like a million times. What am I supposed to do?
No. Sure.
I think I did pretty good for my very first time.
He did actually. He did pretty well.
Okay.
And then so the next thing is, and I kind of agree with this because it messes with the theme of the game. The very end of the game, there's pressure, there's an impetus to diversify suddenly, for no other reason than I have to have at least one cow and I have to have at least one pig, and that meta pressure that comes from oh, I don't want to get the negatives that are associated with getting one, with having none of something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big fan of that. But it's not really that bad, I don't think, because you're only going to get a -1 from not having a particular animal or grain. I think grain and vegetables give you if you don't have any of those, you get a -1 too. But the maximum you can get from having like 8 calves is 4 points.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the game is balanced enough to where if you're focused on a couple of animals, you don't need to worry about the other two. If it's easy to do it, then you would definitely want to pick up, what you're missing. And I don't like that meta pressure, but you don't. It's not swingy. You're not going to completely lose the game based on you not necessarily by not diversifying at the end, because you're only getting -1s from certain things, from not having certain things. And if you really just hyper focus on 1 or 2 animals, then you're going to get 4 points from that, and that balances out.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I don't like it. I don't like that pressure, that moderate pressure to diversify at the end. Player interaction. I disagree that there's enough. I disagree with Greg that there's enough player interaction. I don't think there's enough. So I'm interested enough in the game to really thoroughly enjoy the game, but I think it could benefit from having some player interaction. And what's more, this is a serious analysis paralysis game. So if you're playing 4 or 5 players and it's not your turn and there's no player interaction to speak of, I mean, you can't stop them from going to a spot. So I mean, you're not going to be able to do anything. It's not like you can play an instant or something and stop them from doing. So you're just waiting your turn, and it's an AP style game where like people are like, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? Analysis paralysis. So that can lead to boredom if it's not your turn. So that's a negative, I think. And then finally, I think, actually a couple more things. I think the action cards. I don't know, Greg, do the expansions change out the action cards at all? Are there?
There's only one expansion for it, and that doesn't. It adds different kinds of cards. But there are. Does
it add to the occupations and
no,
minor improvements, or does it add to the actions?
Well, it's different because it has its own set of the Farmers of the Moor is the expansion. It has its own set of minor improvements. So in that game, you get 4 of the base. There's different ways to play, but basically you get 4 of the base game and 3 of the expansion minor improvements.
Well, but I'm asking, does anything ever happen with the action cards?
Oh, you mean on the board?
Yes.
No, but they give you new actions in a different way.
Well, sure. Some of those. Okay, so some of those minor improvements allow you to
they're
do
base.
Things.
No, it's not even minor improvements. They actually give you new actions, but they're not on the board. So you actually draft cards to take actions now. So it gives you new actions to do. Like you get horses. You got to like cut down peat to fuel your house. There's a lot to it, and hopefully we'll get to the expansion one day.
But. Okay, so I was gonna say, so like, I think if you were just playing the base game, the action cards could get a bit repetitive. There's not a lot of variety. That in the first round that you're always going to get the same 4 cards over and over in a random order. At the end of the game, it's the same 2 cards, and it's like which one comes first, and you're going to always see the same cards that come out for the actions, where you can the action cards is where you can place your workers, so the main board. That could get a little repetitive after a lot of plays. And then were you going to say something, Micah?
Hey, I don't think that's
Greg?
true. Oh yeah,
I don't think it's true.
No, I mean I've played. I do own the expansion now, and I'm not an expansion buyer. I will only buy an expansion if I'm like, okay, I've seen enough of this game. I'm ready. And I would say it took me a good 20 to 30 plays before I was like, okay, I'm ready to see what the expansion has to offer. And I even think that was mostly because we play a lot of 2-player, and the expansion kind of takes some of the faults with the 2-player game. It eases some of the tension at some crucial points.
I'm looking at the board and I'm thinking to myself, like, where would an interesting I love this game, but if anything was going to wear out first, what would wear out? And I think it's the repetitiveness of the action cards constantly being the same thing. I admit that's a hard thing to change because the balance is required there. You need to have that sheep spot come out. You need to have fences be able to be built at a certain time.
The reason I disagree here is because any game that you play, there's a set amount of actions you have every single game, right? Just because they come out in cards, it doesn't make it different. So whatever your game is that you, yeah, well, we're not talking about that though. I mean, Go is one action. You know, it's you put a stone on the board. I don't think that's going to wear out because the order you play your pieces in matters quite a bit. What in your hand, your hand of cards changes things up dramatically. I feel. I don't think.
I'm not talking about that necessarily. I'm just talking about the action cards.
Yeah.
And I admit this is the action spaces, and I admit this is a small point, but I don't know. I think that over time,
a small, possibly hypothetical point.
Yeah, I should probably drop it. I mean, it's not.
That's fine. It's
I haven't played it enough to get bored with it. I don't even know if I would, but it looks like a thing that
wonder.
Could, Yeah. Finally, like with the occupations and the minor improvements. One thing I want to say about that, Greg, you said that you disagreed with me on the weight of how important they are. Bear in mind, I did say that card combos, like 30% of the game, that could definitely swing the game,
Sure.
if you got a good card combo. But and that's kind of that kind of comes up as a negative now in the bad, because I think if you get a really good combo of occupation cards and minor improvements, it could be a little swingy. And I think it would be nice if there was, I think I've heard that some people do a draft, and maybe I was actually reading something about the expansion. But drafting those out would be one way to fix that, instead of just having, dealing out 7 cards of the occupations and 7 cards of the minor improvements, dealing out 28 and then spinning it around all the player, if it's 2 players, spinning it between them and have them draft. That would be one way to mitigate that. But I think it could be, if you just happen to get this awesome combo, it could take away from the pressure of the game, how hard it is. Does that make sense?
Okay, Greg, what about you? Negatives of Agricola.
Okay, negatives. I don't. So I'm going to talk about one thing first that I don't consider a negative, but we haven't talked about it yet. So let me talk about it here.
Yeah.
And that is the feeding your people mechanism in Agricola. That's kind of a mechanism that nowadays is frowned upon, and I understand it completely. There's a lot of Euro games have a feed your people mechanism where you have to collect so much food, and every so many rounds you have to spend this much food to feed your people. And I agree that it feels, I don't want to say it's lazy design, but it feels like a very easy way to add tension to a game. It's like you build this whole Euro game up, and then you're like, there's not enough tension. I know, let me just throw some spaces where you have to get food. And
is that what the common criticism is?
I think it is. It just feels kind of tacked on. It feels like kind of a cheap way to add.
To make it a little harder.
Yeah, just to add some tension, because, okay, you got to worry about this. I don't think that complaint holds up with Agricola, because one, it's so tightly integrated with the game itself, the food engine, and the penalty is so high, it's not a side thing. I think it pretty much is the game. So therefore, I just want to address that food feeding aspect. Some people do not like that at all. Agricola, it's very tight. It's very, it's the most brutal feed your people game I can think of. But it's, yeah, anyway, it doesn't feel tacked on here. I do want to say, I agree with Eric. I do think it could use a little more player interaction. I said it's enough for what it offers, but it probably is what prevents it from being my favorite game of all time. There could be more player interaction. And the other point that I think can be a negative is, again, I agree with Eric. In the cards you get are random. You draw 7 cards. So it's possible that someone just gets a combo that just works great for them. And you have that many cards, you have hundreds of cards. It's kind of impossible to balance all of them. So some cards are just better than other cards. However, the way to fix that is just what Eric said. You draft. I always play Agricola, the draft. That's not in the rules, but it's a very common way to play. The only thing with the draft is I never play with the draft with new people, because if you want to talk about AP, You give a new person 7 cards, 14 cards to begin with, and you see their brain just seize up the first time they play Agricola. You now tell them not just that many cards, but we have 4 players here. You're gonna have to do that 4 more times, 3 more times,
Right?
And it's just too much for a new player. But once I feel like a person's ready for it, I always play with the draft because that really helps you balance out that possibility. So none of these are like huge negatives; they're all like possible to look over. But yeah, I mean that's probably where I'm at with that.
Okay. Well, let's go then to our final thoughts on Agricola. What do you think? Do you enjoy it? Would you recommend it? Who would you recommend it to? Eric, anything else you want to say about Agricola?
Great game. Wonderful game. Probably the reason why there's so many farming app games out on your phone nowadays, or things like Harvest Moon, or other big games. I think that they probably spun off of the farming simulation wave that Agricola started. I don't know, I'm guessing, but could be. This is a game for people who like hard decisions, lots of strategies to try each game, and farming. So if you like those 3 things, then this is going to be a game for you.
Okay, cool. Greg, final thoughts? Would you recommend it? What do you think?
Yeah, I recommend it. It's a good hefty game. You just jump into this pool of strategies and mechanisms. I feel like, I mean, there's a lot to wrap your mind around. It's a game I get played a lot because it doesn't really take that long to play. And every game does feel different because of the cards. So yeah, I totally recommend it. I give it an 8.5, I think, 8.5, which is by far the best game that we've reviewed so far. I mean,
I was going to say your highest rated game to date, pretty sure,
yeah,
right?
Easy, right? And I mean, and it comes. I didn't talk about this, but the box is. I mean, it's stuffed full of stuff. That box with the expansion in there, that box would probably kill somebody if it fell on someone. It's a heavy box. I mean, it's just packed full right now. So I mean, it just feels like, even weight, it just feels like a heavy game.
That's a perk, I guess. You could kill someone with the Agricola box.
You notice
Is that a positive or a negative?
I leave it by my outside window here just in case,
Okay.
But no, it's a good game. I recommend it for sure. Especially if you like something crunchy.
Yeah, didn't ask. Can you pull that game? Is it a game that you feel is appropriate for any group, or do you got to pick your group carefully?
You can
play with kids.
You can play the family version of this game.
What's that?
And that does lighten it up a bit. I don't care for the family version so much.
Family version is where you play without the occupation or the minor improvement cards.
It's just a different rule set.
It's almost the exact same rule set. Out. You can flip one board over and suddenly the spaces don't have like play occupation on it. And it's still a heavy game, but it does take away a lot of that information overload. I don't know if you play with little kids, but you could pull it out with maybe people who've played Catan before and you want something next step. I think the family version of Agricola would work. Mm-hmm. But I think to get the full weight of Agricola, you do need those cards. So.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, very good. So, so that's our thoughts on Agricola. Sounds like you guys both enjoyed it quite a bit. So if you haven't checked it out before now, you should go ahead and give it a try. Sounds like probably something that everybody should try at least once, and you probably won't regret it. So thanks, guys. And that game is going to go on our shelf. I forgot to mention the shelf last week when we talked about Ticket to Ride, I think, but this will be game number 7 going on to our 10-game shelf. So getting pretty filled up here. We're getting close to the end. And with that in mind, what are we going to be looking at next?
So keeping it near the same weight level,
right.
Code names. That's a joke for people that don't know the game.
The euro.
It's a very light
a heavy
game.
economic euro.
Heavy economic euro code names.
Right. Okay, well, we'll look forward to that. And until then, this has been a piece of the action.
Pretty sure it's Boyce. Denner was that girl on the motion picture, right? I think
Maybe.
it's Boyce. I just read that they're about to recast this guy
Okay.
in the new Star Trek. So I
Yeah.
believe that's the name. He's the one that offered
I thought it was
illegal
Piper.
booze. Was it Piper?
Yeah. I thought it was Piper.
He offered illegal booze to Pike in that episode. I remember.
One weird thing. I remember a Dr. Mbenga. Now, I know that name. Was that from the? Was he like a? Was he a nurse in the? I know for a fact. Here's what I know. Do you remember that awesome Star Trek book called The Lost Years? It was basically what happened between the end of the series and the first movie, and it was a really, really good Star Trek book, and it had to do with this like old Vulcan that had his Katra trapped in a stone thing, and he was back from the days when they had like full on psychic abilities, and he gets loose, and it was really, really good. I don't remember exactly the name of the book, but it was something along the lines of the Lost Years. Anyway, Dr. Mbenga was like the guy, one of the doctors in there. So I think he had something to do with. I think he was in a couple of episodes. But let's go with. So you're going with Philip Boyce.
I'm gonna go with Boyce. It could be Piper, but I think it's Boyce.
Do you have any thoughts, Micah?
I don't remember it. My guess would have been Dinner, but Greg seems pretty sure that that's not it.
Definitely a guy. It's definitely a guy.
It's an old white dude.
It's a white guy.
It's an old white dude. Okay,
yeah.
Well then that would have been my guess. So apparently not.
Okay. All right. So let's go with Boyce. All right. Greg is right.
All right. Well,
as always, the universe has betrayed me.